I'm Jonathan Rabb. I'm teaching a course this quarter called Place. I call it Place as Character because that's essential in my fiction. And we just moved down to Savannah this year from New York City, and I'm enjoying it very much. No, I never thought I was going to write. I came to writing pretty late in the game. I was about 27 or 28. I was an academic. I did political theory, 16th and 17th century, and was teaching at Columbia, and realized that I had an idea for a book, and while I was supposed to be writing my dissertation, I started writing that first novel, and it was sort of like I was cheating. So I would write the fiction, and then got very lucky, someone wanted to publish it, and I continued to write fiction since then. I was an undergraduate at Yale, and I did political theory, political science, political theory. And then, of course, with that degree, I came out of Yale and made my living for my first 2 years as an actor and a singer in New York. Natural jump from political theory to acting and singing. But I missed the academic side of things. And so I went back to Columbia, got my graduate degrees, and started teaching there. And, of course, in the midst of that, realized that not that there isn't a creativity in political theory and political science, not that there isn't a way for the imagination to run, but I was missing that creative part of myself, having been an actor and so forth. And I just found fiction, and especially historical fiction, a beautiful way to bring together the two things that I like to do. So while I was supposed to be writing my dissertation, I cheated and got one of those early laptops and started writing my first book and began to spend much more time on that. And finished it, got lucky, found an agent, someone wanted to publish it, and I went from there. And then once, I guess, I had written my third book, which was true historical fiction. The first two were more contemporary but had historical themes. The third one, Rosa, was 1919 Berlin. I realized I missed the classroom. So I started teaching at the 92nd Street Y in New York, which is a wonderful program. And then, heard that NYU, might be interested, so I went down and chatted with them, and they were great, and I started teaching there. And when we came down to Savannah, everyone said SCAD, 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 and I understand why now. So I guess word got out. I said that I would like to, and luckily things have worked out. Significantly, and I talk about him a lot when I teach, Greene, who I think is one of the greatest practitioners of the English language. He died in '92. His most famous books, are probably in the 40s and 50s. He also wrote two different kinds of books. He himself described them as two different kinds of books. One group were his entertainments, and I think most people are familiar with those. Those are things like The Third Man, which they made into the great movie with Orson Welles, Joseph Cotten, fantastic. But it's all atmosphere, and it's all, sort of internal life of the main character struggling against himself. But his more serious books, and one of my absolute favorite books is called The Heart of the Matter. And with Greene, it's always not a terribly good man struggling with a relationship. He's usually married and having an affair. Fantastic. He has trouble with God, and he has trouble with politics. And those are things that I find very interesting. He's just a beautiful writer. Writing, like anything else, writing is a muscle, so you have to use it every day, and you have to do it with a good deal of structure and discipline. You're the one creating the structure, you're the one creating the discipline. So, no, I have a pretty rigid regimen. And, I'm at the computer probably between 8:30 and 8:45. I drop the kids off at school, come back. I write if I'm in the creative process as opposed to the editing process. I just write, and then my wife will remind me to eat, so I'll have something to eat, and I'll write some more, and around 4:30 The kids have been home for a while, and the beauty of being in Savannah is I close the computer and we go to the beach, and that's really nice. But the editing is different. Editing you can do forever. You can always play with your stuff. When you're actually in the creative moment, not that editing isn't creative, but the actual creative and moving a blank piece of paper on, that I can do probably for a good concentrated 5 hours a day, and then my brain hurts, so I have to stop. It's interesting because also I'm teaching now at NYU as well. I teach a course, but that's pure fiction, and that's just straight workshop. We come in, we talk about chapters of novels or short stories people are working on, and we spend all the time just workshopping. Here, it is a non-fiction course, and yet, of course, given my background and my wheelhouse, I'm teaching both the non-fiction, but with the fiction, undercurrent, let's call it. And the course is place. And I think it also ultimately will talk about travel writing, but it really is place as character. And I have to say, and I hope my students aren't listening, they're really quite wonderful. And I don't want them to know that just yet. But really some top-notch writing and thinking about writing, which is much more important. For me, when you teach writing, the crucial thing is to have students recognize that you have to approach the material. If you're doing some outside reading, if you're reading Graham Greene or Fitzgerald or a nonfiction piece at Joan Didion, you have to read it as a writer, not as a literature professor or a literature student, and that is a huge shift. And I'll tell you right off the bat, my students are getting that. They're approaching the material as writers. They are looking at things and saying, I'm not so interested in thematically what's going on. We can talk thematically, but that's not the focus. How did they make this shift? How did the writer change voice here? How did we move from time to time? How did we get that moment of vulnerability? It's not why, it's not thematically how does it, extend to the rest of the piece. But in terms of craft, how do I do that? And the students here get that. And I would guess that that's because SCAD focuses, and I think rightfully so, on creating students who understand what it is to go out and actually practice the thing that they're learning, and would actually like to get jobs and get paid for what they're doing. And the only way you do that is to understand the craft. So I'm very, very excited about that. And, it's just the first week. We'll see. I haven't seen any major papers yet, but I've seen in-class writing. And what I'm seeing is exciting. So I'm delighted. Well, we came down to Savannah because I was doing a lot of research on the book that I'm in fact in edits right now, which takes place primarily in Spain. So I knew I would have to do a lot of traveling back and forth this last year. My wife's brother and his wife have been here for about 5 years, and we've always come down for holidays, and so we said, let's use that as our jumping off point. We have small children, it was great, it's open. So we looked at Savannah as our year abroad. We were coming down, and I'd never really lived south of the Mason-Dixon, ever. I'm a New York guy. And came down, thought it's going to be a year. And while we were here, got to meet the community, met some folks who were involved with SCAD, and they found out what I did. My wife is also here this year. She's a former director of primetime casting at CBS TV, so she's starting a casting department or office here, working in performing arts. And got to talk to people, said I would be interested in teaching, and as I said, it went from there. And we've fallen in love with Savannah, so our year abroad is turning out to be a permanent move. The advice I would give is that recognize that writing is a craft. I think it's very easy for people to say, my art, this is my art, I'm an artist. And that's wonderful. But I think there have been very few true artists in the history of the world. The rest of us, we're nice craftspeople. And we try and get a craft, and in order to do that, you have to be willing to work at it. You have to be willing to understand, the underbelly of what it is to write. So if you are compelled to write, you have something to say, and you are willing to work that muscle, then I think writing is fantastic. And the crucial thing is, as in any artistic endeavor, you have to find your individual voice. And you have to be willing to play with that vulnerability and just lay it on the page. And if that's what you love to do, then writing's for you.